Morning, everyone. I don't see faces, so if just want to remind people. Hi, how are you, Alan?
Good.
Just want to remind everyone to when we're in the meeting, I'd like this to be an opportunity to ask questions as we go along. I can guarantee you this is a kind of a crystal ball meeting where we're talking about what we think is going to happen during the session. Some things are known, but some are um, just our estimation of what will be called up as a result of conversations we've had with legislators or our contract lobbyists have. So I'm not going to have the answer to everything. I never do, but I will find the answer to something that you ask me if I don't have it right off the bat. I'm going to ask everyone that if you're not talking to please mute, but when you have a question, please jump in and ask it. And we'll just go through all of the topics that we've got before us today. Uh, I'm looking at you, Alyssa. That was the one thing I was supposed to do, right? In terms of okay, got it. Alyssa's going to be monitoring chat because for those of you who know me well, I get talking and I just lose everything else that's around me for a little while. So if you have a question, like I said, feel free to ask it. But if you decide to put it in the chat session, Alyssa will be monitoring that and we'll call that to my attention. But I want to say thank you very much for joining us. This is our first town hall during one of our, I believe it was one of the premier member meetings, or it could have been the small business roundtable forum. Somebody said, we'd really like it if you did a town hall, do a town hall once a month. And that'd be great for catching me up on what was happening in the profession, specifically in Connecticut. So this is our first, though we have scheduled them every month for the 2024 calendar year. And if you've got suggestions for topics, please feel free to shoot me an email at any time. We did receive some suggestions at the recent Premier member meeting, so we're going to make sure that we handle those. Some of the things that were discussed was the BOI, business ownership interest rules, and then someone else had asked that we have a federal update, and we will do that and probably have someone join us for that meeting to make sure that we've got what's happening in terms of up to the date, up to the minute information on those topics. But we're open to everything. So please don't hesitate to shoot us an idea, and we'll make sure that we cover it in one of our upcoming meetings. So this year is what we call a short session. Every other year, the legislature meets in a long session, which is January to June, and then February to May. And this is one of those that's a February to May. So the legislative session starts on February 7th and ends on May 8th, which means there's just 3 months. And so there's real limitations as to how much they can get done in time, but there also are limitations in terms of money as well. Connecticut's in a very good situation fiscally compared to our past life. Year after year, we were running deficits. We don't have that situation again this year, so that's great. But there are people that whenever you have a penny in the bucket, they want to spend it. And if they see anything else in reserves, which we do, we have a healthy rainy day fund now, they want to tap into that for programs. It's not to say that we don't have some programs or some spending that could take place on a one time without harming us fiscally. But oftentimes the programs that the legislature looks at, or legislators look at, are programs that run year after year, and therefore you build them into your budget, and you know the impact that has. You are all CPAs, you know better than I do. So there is a lot of discussion in the news and around the halls of the Capitol about maintaining our fiscal guardrails, that spending cap and some other provisions we've put in place. And the governor's been pretty strong on that. So it'll be interesting to see how things move forward during the session, because some of the topics being discussed are ones where there are significant expenses associated with them. So they're trying to find some cures for a number of health issues, whether it be the number of hospital beds, the availability to healthcare by small businesses, which is something that many of us care about, or many other things. There are dollars associated with everything they're talking about, and they're going to have to choose what they're going to move forward with. Housing's another big issue this year for the legislature. There simply is not enough housing. And with the number of employers hiring right now, they're very concerned that they won't have a place for their employees to live. So that's another topic that's going to be discussed, because the builders are out there saying that they need subsidies or something else to help them. They need permitting processes streamlined. I don't know where it's going to go, but that's another one that the legislature has said will be one of their priorities for the year. Another issue, which is one of our big issues, is artificial intelligence. Last year, a measure was raised to try to put in place some protections where AI is concerned. There's always concerns regarding bias with the data from AI, whether people that are collecting the data are protecting that data, and many other things. So there was a piece of legislation that called for an artificial intelligence task force to be formed, and it was, and it's led by Senator Maroney, who also heads the General Law Committee, which all of the CPA issues go through. And for him and that group to come up with basically a Bill of Rights. There is a working draft out now that is what I would say more than a Bill of Rights, what you would normally look at and think of as a Bill of Rights. It's basically a document that imposes certain things on developers, deployers, and gives the Attorney General rights to enforce certain rules and request information, so that it's more of a consumer protection where AI is concerned, in hopes of not having products that result in discrimination, and products that you know exactly how information is going to be used, and many other things. So documentation is big in this working draft for the people that are developing that AI, and for the people that are deploying it in some of the programs. A lot of people aren't aware of AI being used in many of the software products we already have. So that's going to be very interesting to watch, and we will keep people up to date on it. We do have a brief summary because the bill is lengthy. So it's just a one-page summary of what the bill does. And if anybody's interested in receiving that, you can contact either Alyssa or myself. And we're sending out an email to all the managing partners with that working draft, and asking them to distribute it to the people at their firms that care about it and want to comment on it. So we don't know who are the tech people at the companies, at the firms. So we're asking for people to share that information so that we can get the feedback, because the best time to work on a piece of legislation is when it's in this working draft form before it's actually released to the public. It's just a little bit more work and more difficult to make modifications after that. Alyssa, when's that going out to the managing partners and the CFOs?
I believe that is a Kirsten question. I think she is on, but I
Okay.
can find out.
Bonnie,
All
that
right.
actually, Bonnie, that went yesterday. I can drop a link as well to the summary and the document in the chat here.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So everyone heard Caitlin. If you're interested and you did not receive that email that went out yesterday, you'll have a link to it in this chat for this session, where you can grab those if you want them. All right. So just on the dollar front this year, we legislators really can't spend a lot of money. They were saying $30 million is the only wiggle room they really had because of the spending cap right now, and the budget that was adopted last year. I understand that the latest numbers that have come in are a little bit higher than that, but numbers fluctuate from month to month, and they are saying that the sales tax is running a bit behind. So I think they're still going to try to stick to not spending any more money than that $30 million. And hopefully they don't need to spend all of that even. We love more cushion so we don't run into what we had in past years. But that whole issue of guardrails that I mentioned earlier is going to be a big one that you hear throughout the session. And so anytime we go forward with a piece of legislation or anybody else does, just be aware that that's going to come up in terms of, well, where you're going to get those dollars from, how you're going to do it. Not every piece of legislation results in additional spending, though. And there are several things that we are interested in seeing move forward that are already on the legislature's, already in the legislature's radar. So I'm going to run through the business issues, which is what today's session is supposed to be about, that we know are coming up. And other than the fiscal, and I mentioned housing, which is a big issue for businesses right now, and healthcare, there are a number of labor bills we expect to see this year. We expect to see some adjustments to the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. We don't expect that to cost more money. Surprisingly to many people, the funding that they have, which is that I think it's a 0.25% tax on individuals in terms of the payroll, they actually have more funding than they need right now. So the tweaks I understand are supposed to help with some of the administration of it, and they're actually talking about possibly lowering that tax on employees. So we do expect paid family medical leave to come up. And right now, that's what they're talking about. Should we lower the tax on employees? And how can we straighten out the program from a legislative perspective so that it's easier for people to understand and take advantage of? Non-competes are supposed to come up again. That's been something that's come up for several years, and that's one of the governor's bills. That's an issue that's always of great interest to the Labor Committee, and they've tinkered with it over the years, but they're saying they're going to take another look at it again. And then one of the other things that I don't believe we get into, but the whole issue of earned wage access is something that's coming up. And I think they're really talking about those organizations that if someone's got a paycheck and they want to be able to go and cash it immediately at a payroll, I don't know what you call them, but you'll see upside, signs up where you can go somewhere and cash your paycheck and get that access to your wages, or you can take a loan and then they take your paycheck. So it's getting people access to their wages immediately or a little bit early. And there's some concerns regarding some of the operators in that field, but the legislation that's being talked about up at the Capitol is concerned to a number of folks. And got to be honest, I'm not sure why. I've never worked in that area, but I'm raising that just so you know it, because that looks like it's going to be a hot topic. So if you have any clients in that area, stay tuned, because that does look like it's going to be one of the hotter topics this legislative session in the Labor Committee. We're not hearing about a lot of other things. We always see some workers' compensation matters arise and some things related to union contracts. But overall, so far, this year seems to be fairly quiet on the labor and employment law front. I have to believe that will change. I handled labor laws for years, and I don't ever remember once in my life having a quiet legislative session, but it looks like we're starting that way, and we'll take it for as long as we can get it. We already mentioned that housing is going to be a big issue, but we didn't talk about taxes at all. And taxes are going to be a hot topic up at the Capitol, not in terms of new taxes as far as we are aware, but what modifications should take place. So last year, the governor got involved in the pass-through entity tax. He said that he wanted to restore the full credit. Then things happened and they didn't end up moving in that direction. This year, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association is leading that charge for full restoration, and they have been speaking with the governor's office about it. So we do expect to have conversations and legislation on the pass-through entity tax. Again, their desire is to restore the full credit. The other tax that may pop up again and hasn't been a topic for quite a while is the unitary tax, combined reporting. We have that in Connecticut, but we have what they call water's edge. It doesn't go beyond our borders. But there have been some people pushing, and it has been adopted in more states now worldwide. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in Connecticut. I've not heard talk about it here yet, but it has been talked about in Massachusetts a bit. New Hampshire recently had a study commission to come together and work on that issue. They rejected it in the end. So we'll see what happens there, but that is one that oftentimes pops up when people want to find a funding source and they say, oh, do this, it'll bring in a lot more money. We've never believed that necessarily making a change does because of the cost of administration or whatever, but we have not had a measure like this. And I'm going to say it's been close to 10 years since the combined reporting was adopted. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But that, again, is expected to come up in some discussions. Another issue that the Department of Economic Development and Community, Department of Economic and Community Development is looking at is eliminating the corporate surcharge. That has been something that's up pretty much every budget year. Because they've just extended the surcharge, and now they're getting involved in saying, no, let's take where it's been extended to and scale it back and eliminate it. Whether they're talking about doing that during a phase out or just trying to do that in one hit, we'll see. But anything that they propose has to go through the Office of Policy and Management and the governor's office before it can be adopted, because it will have to become part of a budget adjustment bill. So that is out there. How much sway they're going to have, do not know. But the fact that it is coming from DECD does mean that it will get some attention. Does anybody have any questions on anything we've discussed so far? Okay. In the whole tort area, there's going to be a lot of activity, and I've had more members ask me about those issues. What are you open for in terms of liability? What are your clients open for in terms of liability? And I have to say there's an organization called the American Tort Reform Association, which some of our members serve on their board, and they work with the state association. So they've put together a state coalition and given us some ideas of some of the measures that may come forward. Luckily, we've already dealt with some of them, such as the False Claim Act, so we don't have to worry about that coming forward this year. But they are expecting some other things to pop up. We don't have anything I know of that they had on their list this year. So far, the things that I've seen have more to do with personal injury cases in terms of the issues that the trial attorneys are pushing, and not business related. If that changes, we will let you know. But when you hear about tort issues and concerns, a lot of the things are happening, already happened in Connecticut, and were either defeated or you've been living with them for years because we haven't had any major changes here for a while. Or just are not something that our legislature is currently interested in. So don't be concerned. We don't have anything coming forward like the issue last year that was proposed but never even raised about CPAs having to pay somebody's taxes as well as penalties and interest if there was a problem with the filing. We don't have anything like that on the horizon that we're aware of. Again, legislators are there to represent their constituents, and if someone has a problem, we could see a bill pop up, but none of those things right now are expected to impact us.
Bonnie, we
yes.
have a question. We have a hand raised, Jeffrey Howard.
Jeffrey, please jump in. You may be muted. Alyssa, I don't see him on the screen. Do you? Oh,
I asked to
Jeffrey,
unmute.
you're muted. Can you unmute him, Alyssa?
I cannot unmute him. I asked him to unmute.
Okay, so Jeffrey, if you can hear us, just unmute when you're ready, and feel free to raise the issue you wanted to. Hi, Brad. You're in the middle of my screen. Haven't seen you for a while. So that's it on the tort front. We are talking with the judicial department to see whether or not it makes any sense, and I'd like some feedback on this one, to try to get into legislation that CPAs working on business ownership interest issues will not be deemed to be participating in the unauthorized practice of law. So we want to, right now, our law is completely silent on it. I've reached out to the judicial branch. I've read those sections of the rules for attorneys and the section that comes underneath it regarding what's unauthorized practice of law. And we don't have anything in there. But I did get calls from people saying, would you tell me whether or not I specifically can do this or can't do this, because the liability firm I have says that they'll cover me so long as it's not an unauthorized practice of law. So again, we reached out there, but when it's silent, you know, you could argue it either way. Right now, I would tell you you're okay, but then later on, if it's decided that it is, are they going to look backwards? What do you do? So curious how many of you would like to see us try to get something in statute. And I don't know how easy that will be, to be quite honest. I don't know where, it doesn't mean that we can't work on it regardless of how difficult it is. But I don't know how the bar feels about this. I've heard repeatedly that it's not an issue that many attorneys want to start getting involved with. But usually when you put something up that says somebody else can go into what they deem their area, you know, they raise concerns. So we do work well with the bar association, so that shouldn't be a problem. But how many of you are interested in really getting into that area? I know the AICPA has been saying this is a great area for us, but Alan, you're unmuted. Can I ask you your
Yeah,
thoughts?
well, the AICPA has been very cautious in their guidance and basically saying you've got to be careful about UPL. But when, like you said, when they're silent on it, we're a little hesitant to do anything. Again, malpractice carriers, I think, seem to be all over the places on this as well, saying, you know, you have to look to state guidance. I think it's a natural fit for most small firms, and the majority of their clients. They're probably going to come to us for that help. You know, they're used to dealing with us on an annual basis at a minimum, and they don't usually go running to their attorney unless they have some sort of an issue. So some attorneys that I've talked to have said, you guys do it. And we're kind of saying, well, maybe you guys ought to do it. So it's not an exciting area that everybody wants to jump into, but I think it's naturally going to be a place where your business clients are going to come to you for guidance. So my thought is, yeah, if we had some guidance, it would be very helpful.
Bonnie, I'm just going to say, you know, our firm concluded that it is the practice of law and that we cannot help with those forms, which kind of makes me happy personally. But, you know, I think that's an area we should get some more definition on, you know.
All right, that's very helpful. I don't know if you read the areas regarding our guidance for unauthorized practice of law, it's not in the statute. So the area that specifically says that CPAs can interpret tax laws and share information, et cetera, are in what we call, attorneys call the practice book. And they're, like I said, they're completely silent on this. I don't know whether we're going to get pushback from the judicial branch to try to modify the rules within the practice book, which were just updated, or whether we'll be able to do it legislatively. Usually we have more control, oddly enough, if it's a legislative fix than we do with the practice book. But we would be covered if it's silent in the practice book, but the legislation, there's legislation that says that it's not deemed the unauthorized practice of laws for CPAs to work in this area. So would you feel comfortable if the practice book is silent, but the statute says that it's an okay area for CPAs to practice in? I'm looking for some head nods or no. No?
You define what the practice book is?
Yeah.
So you know how we have the standards of conduct?
Yes, okay.
Attorneys have the same thing, but it's called the practice book. So it just gives them guidance on what they can practice, how their practice must run, et cetera. It's basically their rules as to what they can or cannot do, but the Bar Association doesn't put it together. It's actually the judicial branch that puts it together. So the court administrator with a committee issues that book and makes the modifications to it. So it is the rules which attorneys must abide by as set forth by the Connecticut Judicial Branch. But it is in that book, those rules, that it states that CPAs were specifically named can practice in certain areas, and they highlight the tax area.
I see.
Bonnie, this is Marge. In the Connecticut CPA Fall 2023, pages 8 through 10, does it go farther than that? No, 8 to 10. It covers this topic. It even gives you a paragraph of what they say you need to incorporate into your engagement letters this year, which I did. And I've done a lot of research on this, and the one question that keeps coming up is when people go in to fill out the paperwork on FinCEN, it asks for an identifier number, but it doesn't tell you where to get it. Well, I took a class yesterday afternoon that actually says the FinCEN identifier number is not actually required. Once you complete the paperwork online, it asks you, do you want to be assigned an FinCEN identifier number? If you say yes, they'll assign you one, which will make it easier in the future if you need to revisit that paperwork, but you don't have to get one. Now, that was never explicit on anything that I read, either from, the IRS or anything else, which like I said, I've done a lot of research on this. Finally got the answer yesterday. So I think that that's important for people to know. But in the Connecticut CPA, it very strongly discourages CPAs, including this paragraph that they say to incorporate into your engagement letters, from giving hardly any information. Even if you tell them of the 23, they may fall into one of the 23 categories of exceptions. There are exclusions within those exceptions that aren't really explicit or put out there. I mean, you really have to study it. And if you tell a client that they fall into this exception just because you're reading the title of the exception, and then it turns out they're not, they can sue you.
So you're explaining exactly what we were sharing is what the AICPA is sharing, and everyone else. There's a lot of concern. I do think that that the fact that many of you have the information to help your clients are going to come to you looking for this, is one of the reasons why we've been trying to figure out how can we make it work without having concerns. There wasn't discouragement from entering into the area because we don't think you're capable of doing it. Mm-hmm. It was protection because everything has all circled around. Is this the unauthorized practice of law? So if this is an area where you're saying that you do have interest, which is what I'm hearing, but you've also got concerns and we can address them, I think that's something that we should add to our list of things we work on this year. I think it would be easier. Could get told no, that they're not willing to do that when I get to the Judiciary Committee up at the Capitol. I think it'd be easier if we did it via legislation, but I could get told that we can't do it there, that the rules have to be adopted by the judicial branch and we could be sent back there. That's fine, but I just need to know that, yes, you want us to work on this, because if you don't care, I don't want to invest that time or effort. But based on what Alan said and some of the heads, there's not a lot of faces here today, but from those that I do see, I saw nodding. So right now, please correct me if I'm wrong. But that, yes, you think it'd be great if we could get this clearly stated that this was not the unauthorized practice of law if a CPA does it. And if that's the case, some of you may not be happy that you're going to be able to do it now, but others would like to be able to do it because it fits in with your practice and the things that clients are already asking you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, one other thing too, Bonnie, is everywhere you look, it says you're supposed to refer your clients to an attorney who is well versed on the topic. Who's that? We have no idea who's well versed on the topic.
So far, it's my understanding, every time I've had this discussion, that the attorneys are gun shy about this area too, and they're saying, see your CPA. So that's the one thing that gives me hope that we will be able to get it through in one session. Things usually take a couple of sessions to get through. But I think we might have a decent chance because the Bar Association may not be wound up tight about this issue. So we'll see. So I don't have anybody to refer you to, Marjorie, because I don't know of anybody, I don't know of any attorneys that are saying, yes, this is an area I want to dive into. But I'm sure we'll hear more about it as things move along because it's here to stay, and we're going to have to comply. And so are the businesses, other businesses. So we'll be with this for a while. Everyone loves a new law, right? Okay. So we will add that to our list here. If I don't make a note, I won't remember. I'm sorry. We'll get that on the list to definitely do that. And then we'll circle back to you in the newsletter, Caitlin, that's okay, right? To give people an update once we find out whether this is something the legislature and the judicial branch are open to us modifying via legislation, or whether it's going to take a longer route and have to go through the rules committee at the Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Got it. I wanted to let people know that privacy is expected to pop up again too. And so this is the rules about when the data you have and how you must store it and the rest of the things that go along with all those significant pieces of legislation. We actually passed something in Connecticut and have for a couple of years running. We've had pieces of privacy legislation passed. And one that passed last year was a little bit more significant. We were very happy with it because it didn't go nearly as far as California, which is what the legislature initially had put forth. They put forth the California legislation, which everyone has said across the country you couldn't comply with. It was just so crazy. California's gone back and modified it a couple of times. But in the meantime, several states started looking closely at the privacy issue and decided to do something that was not as extreme, but brought forth protections that they felt were acceptable. So Virginia and Colorado were two states that were talked about. And there were two states that Connecticut looked at their legislation to see whether or not we should do something like that. We ended up having the legislature pass a measure that everyone keeps on calling not quite Colorado. So it's a little bit more lenient, easier to comply with than Colorado's legislation. But the person who has chaired those efforts, which is Senator Maroney again, isn't always so happy when he hears it called not quite Colorado. That to us is actually a compliment, but it makes him wonder whether he's done enough in protecting people. So we've been told to expect the privacy issue to come back again. Senator Duff, who is the majority leader in the Senate, is very interested in this topic. And each time it comes up, gets involved in it as well. He's not as moderate on the issue as Senator Maroney is, but Senator Maroney so far has been the one who's been deemed the appropriate person to care for it. I cannot tell you what's going to happen with this or what's going to be proposed, but I do expect there to be an effort on the part of some to try to put forth additional restrictions where that data you maintain is concerned. we'll stay on top of it. We're going to try to keep it where it's at. Another thing we try to do is have everything that moves forward in this area have an exemption for anybody that's covered by the Graham Leach Bliley legislation, and that's you. So you can get a carve out of it. But I want you to know that we do expect privacy legislation to come back again, and that's something that when I ask for your input, if you could please provide it to me, I would greatly appreciate it, simply because it is a short session, so things will move much quicker this year. I'm not going to have as much time to try to find someone who does know about something. And particularly for our smaller firms, knowing what you can or cannot deal with, I think is really important. It's one thing when you've got someone who's internal doing IT, we don't at the society. So when we're told we have to do something, we've got to figure out who that is, how fast they can get it done, etc. So having your input would be greatly, greatly appreciated on that front. Any questions about privacy? Any concerns that you've already had to deal with? Trying to see. Okay. I don't see any heads shaking, so I'm going to say we're good there. All right. So I just want to touch base then on a few of the pieces of legislation that the legislature is saying are going to be their major issues. This is something that the Office of Legislative Research puts together every year and releases so that people know about issues that may come up. And this is largely based on inquiries that the legislators make of the Legislative Research Office, because then they have to write up, I'm going to call it mini white papers on the issue and bring it to write up a response for each legislator. Alyssa, did you start to say something to
Yep,
me?
I believe we have a question. Monique, you can unmute and ask your question. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, Bonnie, I'm backpedaling. This is on the subject of, and I'd like to make an announcement that I'm personally handling my own case in the appellate court. And I've been welcomed by my case manager, who has allowed me to handle my case because for several reasons, I've not been able to get an attorney to handle it successfully because of the other side, the opponent, who's a CPA, a partner of Ernst & Young, and I'm an alumnus of Ernst & Young with an excellent record. And he has played foul with me, and it's coming up for hearing, and the case number is 46041. It's appellate court. So if you folks and the audience can follow this, I will be personally I'll be personally handling my case.
Oh, really? Can you tell if
Kirsten, we can hear you.
I can give you a prelude to this. It's my personal condo case, and it has become a cancer.
Do you want, if you'd like, there's not something I can do with legislation there, but I can talk to you offline about this afterwards. I can give you a call when this is over.
Yes, please.
That's fine.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bonnie, because your assistance in this will help to inform the whole profession. And mine is a dedication to the profession in my efforts. So it's we all, by the way, it involves insurance, the insurance business where people file false claims. And I've opened up that whole Pandora's box, how it was done or how it is being done. And we all, including yourself, it's been calculated that each family in the state of Connecticut contributes $1,800 for false insurance claims. So it's a service to everybody.
Thank you for raising that. Alyssa, can you just make a note for me to contact Monique afterwards? All right,
Yes.
perfect. All right.
Thank
I'll
you.
do that. You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Bonnie. Yeah.
You're welcome. All right, so I just want to run through a couple other topics that they're saying going to be hot. They obviously list the appropriation as the first one and the budget reserve fund called the rainy day fund, just in terms of some people want to strip the guardrails that we talked about. Other people want to keep it. They raised the earned wage access, which I raised with you in terms of people's access to their own pay. Mental health is going to be a big issue this year in terms of resources. And I think that's really important for all of us to be aware of, because one of the things that's been found in the recent surveys and interviews that have been held with the people that I'm going to call it the last two generations, so the Gen Zs, and I'm not sure who the Ys or whatever in our profession, have said that they are looking for places that have mental health support or mental health services. That's something that's really, really increased significantly since COVID. So I do want people to be aware of the fact that the legislature is taking that up. Just how do we have more opportunities for people to seek help, or I think people just think it's really important and want access, or to know that there's access. So that's going to be a hot topic this year as well. Another issue that I think is going to be interesting is the whole issue of early childhood education. And I raise that with you because one of the problems that people are having, those individuals that want to return to work, can't find daycare. And so that's impacting businesses a lot. There's just not enough slots. So if you're starting to tell people that they need to be back in the office, or you have people back in the office and their child's getting ready to move from one, room at a daycare center to another, there's just not capacity right now to take care of those issues. So the legislature is diving into that as well. And if you hear about that, just be aware that they are looking into that, that too. Every year, education finance funding is an issue, and that will be an issue again this year. Teacher certification. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the issues trying to find teachers. I know that we are trying to make sure that we have quality accounting teachers, both at the high school level and at the college level. But the certification process in Connecticut is different than the other 49 states. And therefore, when we have someone move to Connecticut, or who's in one of our border states that's willing to teach at one of our Connecticut schools, one of those classes, they can't. So the state's looking at alternative routes to certification that may be a little bit easier. And these people are qualified, they're certified to teach in another state, just not Connecticut. But the test that they take, like for example, when my daughter graduated from college, she was going to be a teacher. She took the test in Massachusetts to be a high school English teacher. She was licensed in 49 states. She was not licensed in Connecticut. By the way, I paid for that education. She chose to go into a different career, but that's another story. So they're trying to find ways to make it easier for people to come to Connecticut and teach, given our current certification system. So that's a plus, because one of the places where we saw a lot of people retire was actually the business teachers in the high school, and we want really good teachers to increase our pipeline. So that's going to be a hot topic this year as well. The other thing that's coming up that I don't think many of us get involved in, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, is the whole issue of energy. But there is a lot going on with renewable energies, and especially when it comes to wind. So expect to hear a lot about that in the news. The other thing that's going to come up quite a bit for companies is environmental, and in particular, their waste management system. So if you have anybody that is dealing in that area, please be aware of it and and pay attention, because those measures usually have huge price tags, not for the state, but for the individuals that need to comply with those laws. We talked a little bit about some state tax relief for individuals or small businesses, anybody with the pass-through entity, in terms of trying to restore that tax credit. But they're looking at a number of things, and they're really going to focus a lot on that tax expenditure report that the Department of Revenue Services has been charged with releasing. And we will make sure that that everyone gets that link again too. But we've talked about that a bit with the State Tax Committee and others, that DRS was looking at that. And the legislature is going to be combing through that to make sure that taxes are fair. And what that means, we're never quite sure. But that is a big issue. So we're going to have to keep our eye on the Finance Committee and what comes out of that report being released. Again, it's a tax expenditure report, and those come out every couple of years. So OFA always, releases that report. But this time DRS has had to indicate again, some as to whether or not they feel something is fair, if there's a certain population that's being treated differently. So a different look this year than in the past, and we have to see if that results in legislation being issued as a result of that. We already talked about artificial intelligence. I'm sure you've heard a lot about the elections. That really doesn't impact us as a profession, so I'm not concerned about that at this time. Housing, we talked about in terms of the funding or the lack of housing, and then how are we going to just get more? So both housing affordability and availability are top issues. The other thing that I think is going to pop up a bit is some of the insurance laws. So we mentioned healthcare before, and that's definitely going to be an issue this year. But one of the things that's going to come back is how can particularly small businesses be helped in that area? And so one of the issues that was raised last year that almost made it through, but was stopped in the end, is something called association health plans. This is a big issue for, I know, the Credit Union Association, the Nonprofit Association, and for CBIA. They all want to put together a plan to try to provide health insurance to or give their members a chance to procure health insurance through them at a lower cost than it would be if they went into the regular open market. And I do expect there to be a lot of conversations around that. Legislation will definitely be put forward. The Insurance Committee House Chair is very much in favor of it. I ran into her the other day in Rocky Hill, and she said she's going to push that again. So the health insurance for small employers, other ways for them to get it at a more reasonable cost, is something that they're going to try to get. On the judicial front right now, we don't see any changes coming in the probate court, which is something that many of you care about. Have not heard of anything at all in that area, and the probate judges have been fairly quiet. So at this time, don't expect any changes there. But who knows what will happen? We'll keep you up to date on that. And in terms of the Labor Committee, their real focus, I'm going to say, other than the issues I raised with you, thing I've heard a lot in the news has been the tip credit, which is something that we don't really get involved in either. So not worried about the Labor Committee this year, though I'm not completely without concerns, because I just never know what they're going to pop up with. I do think that, and I don't know how many of you deal with property taxes, but property taxes are going to pop up. I think of that more oftentimes as a municipal issue, because the Finance Committee at the legislature does not deal with it. It's dealt with by the Planning and Development Committee. But the motor vehicle property taxes, I do expect to be a hot topic again this year. Every once in a while, there's a piece of legislation put forward that says that we're all going to pay one fee statewide for property taxes. It usually comes from somebody from one of the cities. In particular, actually, the Senate President, Marty Looney, has pushed it year after year, and he's from New Haven. That will be back again this year, but it's not just him pushing it. So it seems like it's got a little bit more weight this year. I don't feel like it's ever made it that far, but given the number of complaints regarding property taxes, the legislature's, I'm going to say, inability to come up with anything that really addresses people's concerns in that area overall, they may actually go forward with something this year to address some concerns by just dealing with the motor vehicle property tax. I think that other than that, this year, there's not a lot being discussed. Again, it's a short year. They have limited ability to start new programs up. So everything else that's being talked about really has to do with more minor issues, such as, can you put a camera to stop people going through red lights and then bill them that way, find them that way? That seems to be a big topic in every meeting lately, is when are they going to start imposing motor vehicle laws through cameras? But I'm happy to say that is not something that we'll be lobbying on one way or the other. I actually feel like the stuff that'll be coming at us is not as much of a concern this year. More, we do have proposals that our nonprofit committee has requested, our governmental accounting and audit committee have requested, and our tax committee have requested, that will keep us quite busy, and we're trying to move forward on those pieces. But in terms of stuff coming from the legislature, it's all stuff we care about as individuals, and some of the things that we'll have to pay close attention to for the society. But more of it is they're big issues. A short session and lack of dollars, I don't know how far they'll really get. So does that help at all in terms of giving you an overview? If your clients ask what's going on, healthcare, housing, artificial intelligence are all going to be big issues up at the Capitol this year. But a lot of the other issues are ones where they're simply not going to have the time or the money based on what we're being told right now. I do want to say that the legislature literally can change their focus overnight. If something happens, meaning that, a legislator has something with one of their constituents arise that we didn't know before, and they can get other people to join on, or something happens within one of our communities, things can switch easily. But right now, they've been saying the same stuff for the last couple of months. So we haven't seen any variance in terms of the issues that they're planning on focusing on. So I'm just going to open it up to questions to see how people feel. We've got a couple of minutes left. Nobody will cry if we stop early, but I want to make sure that we touched on the things that are of most interest to people.
Bonnie, I just want to say the State Tax Committee, I think, is working on a few administrative type of things with DRS, but very little on the legislative side, as far as I can tell. I know there's one comment in the chat room regarding taxes on advisory services, advisory and consulting. That's a tough one, only because of the size of the fiscal note on that.
It is something that CBIA has in their legislative agenda this year, so we will support that. But Alan, you're 100% right. The impact that it will have, and the fact that the legislature is trying to work on the fiscal impact it will have, and the fact that the legislature is really trying to work on healthcare and housing, both of which are going to cost some dollars, makes it unlikely that either of us will be successful in getting that through. It doesn't mean that we won't testify in support of it, etc. But it's not expected to make it through this year. You're absolutely right, Alan. I've got the State Tax Committee blueprint in front of me, And the three issues that they're talking about are allowing for a basis modification upon the sale of an asset as a result of depreciation, is one of them. Another is, which is kind of backwards, but do not disallow bond premium amortization on non-Connecticut municipal bonds or provide a basis judgment. Reduce the interest rate on assessments and refunds and tie it to the federal interest rate. Those are the three I have that are purely legislative that we're working on. The bulk of our recommendations from the committee this year are administrative, as Alan said. Thank you, Alan, for jumping in there. I did not see that chat.
Bonnie, Brian has a question. Brian. You're up.
Hi, this is more of a public service announcement than a question, but it affects all of us. Even the consumers, our clients. Connecticut changed their bottle bill, which maybe some of you are aware of. It's 10 cents versus 5 cents. That's fine, but I also realized as I'm looking at all my containers I bought from the Stop and Shop earlier this week, I bought Welch's grape juice. That's worth 10 cents now. I bought pineapple juice. That's worth 10 cents. I bought kombucha. That's worth 10 cents. Quite frankly, you know, I don't know if those just return bottles or not, but a lot more bottles, anything you drink is going to be worth 10 cents now, basically, because now it says CTRV on the back of every label. Look at every label for everything you buy. If you drink it, if it's a CTRV, it's worth 10 cents and you actually paid 10 cents. Look back at my receipt. I'm like, whoa, I paid 10 cents for that. So I know the state probably makes money from this. And I know that's part of the concern. I'm not sure how much education they have been doing for these redemption centers. I don't know how I'm going to bring back my grape juice bottles to Stop and Shop to get 10 cents, but I guess I can do that. I'm not sure how many people are aware of how much they expanded the bottle bill, not only to 10 cents, but everything you drink now, it seems like. I bought pomegranate juice. That's worth 10 cents. So I'm just it's more of a public service announcement to everybody about the bottle bill, how it's changed a lot just like this January 1st. So one more thing to think about.
Brian, you didn't mention any of the nip bottles that you probably
Oh,
have
that's
been
right.
buying
There's
as
a nip
well.
tax
Yes.
too. I forgot about that, Alan.
Yeah, the nips have been a hot topic at the Capitol. The way they talk about it, you would think that you never put your foot down on the ground without first stepping on nip bottles, but I guess it is an issue in some areas. Yeah, I live near the Rhode Island border, and I grocery shop in Rhode Island oftentimes because I don't have to deal with them. They have a bottle return, but it adds up. The 10 cents adds up quickly, especially if you've got younger people in the family that are taking them to sports practices or little ones off to childcare, et cetera. So, you know, a lot of that stuff people don't realize about until after it's gone into law. And so I appreciate your saying it because I'm sure that a lot of people will be raising that issue before too long.
This must be a revenue generator for the state because I'm sure they collect more than they pay out. They have to.
They clearly say that they do it for environmental purposes, but the state does get a huge chunk of that money. Does not stay with the grocery stores, et cetera, that sell. They have to do all that work, but then they have to turn over any uncollected or unpaid funds to the state. So It's kind of like what is it called? Unclaimed property, where the state grabs that money.
Bonnie, you have a cute dog, by the way.
Oh, you just, oh, sorry. My husband's leaving for work, and I guess Kobe's joined us for the meeting. If I put him on the ground, he'll cry though. So we'll put up with him appearing as a cameo. No, we won't. He's distracting. Say goodbye, Kobe.
He's disappearing and reappearing. He seems like because you have the blue screen. The disappearing dog. You could do magic tricks.
I could do magic tricks. Oh, brother. Well, we're at 1 minute to 9 o'clock. Is there anything else that people would like to raise? So I just want to announce that when we decided to do this, again, it came about as a couple of members suggesting we do it. Actually, Alan had suggested in an advisory council meeting last year that we start these up, and I didn't move on it as quickly as I should have. but we're going to be doing them now. They're scheduled for the rest of the year. I will be coming up with the agendas to let everyone know what's coming up each month, but we want it to be information that's hot at the time too. So we're not going to have the schedule. We'll have the schedule for the full year, but we won't have the topics for the full year. But we'll make sure you get that information as soon as it's available. We're going to switch how we're doing it a little bit. You'll still get the link, but we're going to start offering 1 hour of CPE for the town halls too, because the Connect meetings have been slowly dissolving as people don't want to drive places anymore. So we're going to have you sign in the way you do with CPE, because that's what we have to do if we're going to offer it, and then have you indicate that you're in attendance during the meeting going forward. So we'll start that for the February meeting. I didn't think about that in time to do it for this meeting because your links would have changed, and this morning would have been a nightmare because I didn't think of this till last night. Just want to let you know we're again scheduled for the remainder of the year. The topics will be chosen in before the meeting, but not that far in advance, so that we can make sure it's a topic that's of interest to people at the time. We will start offering CPE. So next time you come in, expect to have to put your name in to get into
Thank you
the
for the
meeting.
CPE. The ICPA offers it with their town hall, so obviously.
Right. So we're going to do the
follow
same thing.
And that
and
AICPA town hall seems to have taken off ever since it all started up COVID, and now they're even doing it in tax season. And it's like before CPE was like barren, not allowed during tax season. But I think with COVID, we all realize, hey, this is an important, even to find out something in March, we should know about it now versus waiting till June or May. I'm just thinking that I gotta be honest, do applaud the ICPA for keeping that going, because I don't watch I'm registered for all of them. Like, I don't go to all of them, I just can't, but I do appreciate that they're really providing additional resources. I like them when I do go listen to them, because they are pretty relevant and timely for me.
And so we're going to be doing them once a month. And if you can't make it, you can't make it. But they're there. Not everyone has the same busy season. So we're going to make sure that we do stuff throughout the year. We're not doing it as frequent. I think the AICPA does it more than once a month, but we're going to start off with once a month.
Yeah, they have more resources though, obviously.
Yes. That's an understatement. Okay, is there anything else anybody would like to raise today? All right, I don't see anybody with a little fist in the window, so I'm going to say thank you very much and have a great day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.